the nature of this program. Viewer discretion is advised.
You're listening to Odyssey, A Tale from the Road, an audiobook by Christopher Cologne. All rights reserved. Any resemblance to persons living or dead are purely coincidental.
Chapter 12. I took my shower. I was able to wash off all the blood that had caked itself between my skin and clothes. It felt like I washed away all my sins of the past couple of days. A new beginning, a baptism if you will. The feeling of cool air drying my body, it was pure rapture. When I got to the dining room, I heard a familiar voice telling a familiar story. It was Corey. He was retelling our whole story to Farmer and Mrs. Nimble. Jimmy and Dimitri were jumping it, adding their own details. Now the Nimbles knew of our troubles and plight. I wondered how they would react if I told them their own daughter had taken it upon herself to evict their current guests, before we got too comfortable. I understood where Holly was coming from. It reminded me of the old adage, house guests are a lot like fish. After a few days, they start to stink. I wouldn't want to take advantage of the Nimbles, they were real salt of the earth people. Even jaded Holly had her charms. You had to respect the fact that, even though she kept it behind closed doors, she was trying to keep her parents' best interests at heart. Corey was mid-sentence when I walked into the dining room. He stopped, gave me a cold look, and continued regaling the family with the story of our adventure. I was embarrassed to have our dirty laundry being aired out to the Nimbles. They were forgiving and understanding, but being around such accepting people made me feel like a real piece of garbage. I wouldn't want innocent people like this getting sucked into our problems with the whale. They had enough to worry about. Holly also sat in the dining room listening to Corey's story. It was everything I had just told her, so at least she knew that I wasn't lying. She could tell that Corey and I certainly didn't conspire on this story. Corey and I could hardly stand each other's presence, as of late. So neither of us could have been telling the same lie without conferring with each other first. I never did like that son of a bitch. Farmer Neil declared, when Corey finished our story. Neil. Mrs. Nimble was shocked. Please, watch your mouth. I'm sorry dear, but the whale has been nothing but a burden to the people of this great state ever since his brother took office. Cain killed Abel, you know. But how much of your brother's nonsense can one man tolerate? I sought a look at Corey. Farmer Neil continued, Arnie Ellis has driven so many people away from the good Lord. He an idolater. He worships money and power. He runs houses of ill repute. Prostitution, gambling, gun running, drug smuggling, bootlegging, everything that turns people against their fellow man. God forgive for saying this, but the world would be a better place if the whale never existed. Neil, it's not your place to judge. Mrs. Nimble was trying her best to calm her husband down. Arnie Ellis will have to face his creator one day, and he will have to pay for all of his sins. Let go and let God. I never did like that phrase, let go and let God. It was such a cop-out. Am I supposed to sit back and let things go to waste, because it was some part of a bigger plan I don't understand? Fuck that. I was never much for religion, but I always took some solace in the saying God helps those who help themselves. That makes more sense. If you have the ability to do something, do it. Don't sit around waiting for some invisible force to come and magically intervene in your life. If you sat there and held your breath waiting for change, you likely end up suffocating. I respected the good type of people like the Nimbles, but they put too much credence in staying meager and humble. That was not enough for me. Farmer Neil was still fuming. I tried to snap him out of it. Thank you for your concern, sir. I wouldn't want to make our problem with the whale your problem also. You've already have done so much for us. More than we could expected from a stranger. But we really need to get going. Corey, Dimitri, and Jimmy looked at me like I just went crazy. We were eating good, we were clean, and we were in the company of good people, and here I was asking to leave. To leave out in a world filled with people who literally were out to kill us. I did sound crazy. But the boys didn't know that we weren't going to be welcome for long. Holly wanted us gone. I was just putting the wheels in motion. Where are you boys headed? Maybe I could give you a ride. All this time running from the whale, Gabby, and the goons, I never really gave much thought on exactly where our destination would be. I was just heading away from trouble, which hopefully was towards safety. All I could think about was the safest place that I could imagine. Home, Ithaca, New York. Where our families were. They had no idea how much trouble we were in. They were used to us being incommunicado while we were out on the road. So, for all they knew, we were still rocking out every roadhouse and juke joint east of Lake Ontario. I thought about all those club owners that had been waiting for us to show up and play their clubs, and we just stood them up. Surely we were going to be blacklisted from any future gigs. Our semi-professional career was dead. Then I thought about Raphael's family. I had to explain to them what happened. I got their boy killed. He followed me out onto the road, so naturally he was my responsibility. But they need to understand that he was a grown man who made his own decisions. Nobody held a gun to his head and told him he had to go out on tour with the band. He could have opted out. I could have found a million other guys to replace him on tour. He would be our drummer for home gigs, and we would bring some other spastic over-caffeinated kid to play the skins. Such was life on the road. Take it or leave it. I blurted out, "Ithaca." Holly looked at me like she wanted to break my nose, again. I could almost read her mind from that look. How dare I mention a place so far away? I should have said something that would have been a lot more closer and convenient, like just drop us off at the nearest train station, or no thank you, we don't need a ride. But like when she kissed me, I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip by. Ithaca? That's quite far from here. The round trip alone is going to be murder on my spine. I make short trips to the market and such, but that's going to be a bit more taxing. Farmer Neil said. Holly jumped to her feet. That's all right, Pop. I'm sure they don't expect you to drive them all the way to Ithaca. Right, Andy? The ball was in my court. Holly was ready to kill me and hand my corpse over to Arnie Ellis himself, just for my audacity. Well, I started to answer. Nonsense. What kind of Christian would I be if I turned my back on these boys, in their hour of need? Ask and ye shall receive. Ithaca it is. Farmer Neil wasn't going to be dissuaded. I kept my mouth shut. He wanted to take us. I wasn't going to refuse. I promised myself that the moment I got home, I would scrounge up whatever money I could find and mail it to the Nimble family farm, with no return address. Farmer Neil would have to accept the money. It was the least I could do for his hospitality. I knew that if I'd offered him money once we got to Ithaca, he wouldn't take it from me. He was too set in his ways to accept money from a person he had set out to help. Holly had continued to unsuccessfully convince her father not to go. It was too far out of his way to take us on the long drive to Ithaca. He was too caught up in his own ether of self-righteousness to hear a word she said. Moments later I was back in the cab of the pickup truck with Jim and Dimitri sitting in the back. Corey spitefully hopped up, joined them, cursing me out, not so quietly under his breath. We were on the road. I don't know if it was the expanse of long trip and the rocking of the truck that had lulled me, or just plain exhaustion, but I fell asleep. That was a big mistake. I don't know how many hours passed from the time I closed my eyes, to the time that I almost broke my neck from the whiplash of the pickup truck stopping abruptly. The instant I was regaining consciousness, I had no idea where I was. Then it dawned on me that I was in the passenger seat of Farmer Neil's pickup truck. He was driving us back to Ithaca. My stomach was full of food and I was very relaxed after the warm shower I took back at his house. I was wearing his son's clean clothes, which were very comfortable and conducive to my falling asleep in the first place. All of this ran through my mind, faster than it took for a hummingbird to flap its wings. But I was being violently thrown forward in my seat. If I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, my ragdoll relaxed body would have easily been flung through the windshield. What was going on? Did we have an accident? Was Farmer Neil all right? If I was being whipped around like this, what about the guys in the back of the pickup without seatbelts? Or seats for that matter? I heard them. I heard Jimmy's voice, Dimitri's voice, and Corey's voice. All of them were yelling out their own version of whoa. If I was hearing their voices, that meant at least they were alive. Once again, all of these events only took milliseconds to register in my mind. The pickup truck had finally stopped in its forward momentum. No crash. For sure, with all of that snapping forward motion, we should have hit something. Maybe we almost hit something. That's what probably happened. Maybe a deer bolted out in front of the truck and Farmer Neil slammed on his brakes. Thank goodness for his vigilance. Deers used to pop out in front of the stink box all the time, and they would panic and freeze in our headlights, and you would have to swerve just to miss them. Hitting a deer would be like hitting a person. Some of those suckers could get up over 100 pounds. And that could do serious damage to your grille and front bumper. My chin was buried in my chest so I couldn't see what was going on, while we were coming to a halt. As soon as I was able to, I tilted my head up. It was disorienting, blood had rushed to my head and I swear, I felt my brain slosh around inside my skull. I felt that feeling before, when I used to get way too into my guitar playing. I would thrash around the stage and pound my head back and forth to the music. I would end up paying for it the next day with a sore neck, so I tried my best not to do that too often. I looked out the front window of the pickup. Nothing. Maybe the deer that we almost hit had already made it across the road before we hit it. There was no deer to be seen though. And we weren't moving. What the hell was going on with Farmer Neil? There was nothing obstructing our way. So why weren't we moving? Did he have a heart attack while he was driving? Did his lungs finally decide to give up while we were out on the road? We were stopped. If he died at the wheel, I highly doubt he would have sufficient control of his faculties to stop the truck the instant before life escaped his body and went up to heaven. Why were stopped? And why so suddenly? I looked over to Farmer Neil and I expected to see him dead slumped over the wheel. I didn't. Come to think of it, I wish that's what I did see.
Please visit twostrangersonePodcast.net.